I've always been a calm person when it came to my wife's cell phone. I never had that paranoia of snooping through messages, checking calls, or being suspicious of her silence at night. I always believed that trust was the foundation of everything, and for years, that trust seemed solid, stable, almost unshakable. But that night, that specific night, something changed in a way I'll never forget. And the worst part is that the change didn't start with a scream, an explicit betrayal, or an obvious mistake. It started with a simple vibration. They were 0047 in the morning. I woke up to that muffled sound. It wasn't my cell phone. I always leave it on Do Not Disturb mode. It was hers. The device glowed on the nightstand, the screen flickering on and off, like a beacon trying to warn me that something was wrong. She was fast asleep beside me, her body relaxed, her breathing heavy, completely oblivious to the chaos that little device was about to unleash. My first reaction was normal. I thought it was work. It always was. Whenever the phone rang late at night, she would say the same phrase, with the same tired expression. It's just work. The phrase had become a sort of catchphrase in our house. Sometimes I'd even joke around, repeating it the same way she said it with that bored tone, and she'd laugh, or pretend to laugh. The truth is, over time, I started to feel like she didn't even need to explain anymore. It was always the same thing. Some client asking for something urgent, some tight deadline, some problem to solve at the company. But that night, the story was different. My phone vibrated again. This time, for longer. The screen lit up long enough for me to see a preview of the notification. I couldn't see the whole message, just the sender's name. And the name that appeared, it wasn't what I expected. She wasn't a client, she wasn't a friend, she wasn't a work group. That was the name, her boss. My heart raced so fast I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't jealousy, it was instinct. As if some part of me, deep down, had been waiting for that moment for months, maybe years. I didn't want to think anything bad. I didn't want to believe there was something hidden there. But something about that notification gave me chills. I stood there, sitting on the bed, watching the screen fade to black, as if I were watching a warning from the future. The question surged within me with such force it seemed to scream, if it was just, work. Why did she never let me see those messages? Why did she always change her posture when I got close? Why would her boss text her at almost 1 a.m.? I knew I couldn't just open the phone. It was locked. She never hid the password until a few weeks ago, when she set a new one and never mentioned it again. That had bothered me at the time, but I didn't want to seem controlling. I didn't want to cause a fight, so I let it go. But now, seeing that name shining on the screen in the middle of the night, I realized I shouldn't have let anything slip by. The phone vibrated again, then again, almost as if insisting, look, pay attention. I felt a mixture of fear, anger, and confusion. It wasn't just a notification, it was a warning. My hand almost reached for the phone. I was about to lift the screen and try to see anything before it went dead again. I didn't want to invade her privacy. I wanted to invade the lie, if there was one. But the exact moment I touched the phone, she moved her arm as if she were waking up. I froze it. She turned to her side, pulled the blanket up, and continued sleeping. But that movement was enough to make me recoil. I couldn't risk waking her. Not now. I sat silently in the darkness, on the edge of the bed, my cell phone still vibrating as if it were pulsing against my back, calling to me, provoking me, testing me. I took a deep breath, several times. I tried to convince myself it was nonsense, that I was tired, stressed, seeing problems, where there weren't any. But the truth doesn't disappear just because you try to ignore it. And at that moment, something inside me broke. Small, invisible, but real. A fissure, a crack that would never close again. Because I knew that from that moment on, nothing would be the same again. And that simple question, if it was just work, why didn't she want me to see it? It started to grow and grow and grow inside my head until it became a hole that consumed everything around it. And I didn't know it yet, But that early morning would only be the first step in a revelation that would destroy everything I believed about my marriage and about the woman who slept beside me. The truth is that no relationship is destroyed overnight. There's no magical moment when everything suddenly breaks. Most of the time, the end begins silently, discreetly, almost invisibly, and when you realize it, the trust is no longer the same. Today, looking back, I clearly see the point where everything started to change. But at the time, I didn't want to see it. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of love. Maybe because admitting something was wrong meant accepting that what we had was in danger. And it all started with small changes. Things so subtle that anyone on the outside would say, "That's normal. You're exaggerating." But those who are involved in the relationship can feel the difference. Feel it in your body, in the air, in the energy. And I felt it. The first change was that the cell phone was always held face down. Before, she would leave her phone anywhere, on the sofa, in the kitchen sink, on the car seat, even under a cushion. She never worried about it. Sometimes I would call her attention to it. "Honey, plug that phone in to charge. It's going to turn off." And she laughed, saying she didn't give a damn about it. But then, suddenly, things changed. Now, whenever we arrived home or when we sat down at the table for dinner, she would turn her phone face down in a quick, almost automatic gesture. If I came near, she would discreetly pull the device closer to her. A simple, almost imperceptible movement, but repeated so many times that it started throbbing in my head. One night, I jokingly asked, "Turning your phone around, are you hiding a secret message there?" She laughed. But it wasn't a natural laugh. It was a short, nervous, almost rehearsed laugh. That laugh echoed inside me for days. The second change was showering immediately upon arriving home. We always had a simple ritual. She would come home from work, take off her shoes, give me a quick kiss, tell me what had happened during the day, and ask about mine. Sometimes she would throw herself on the sofa as if she were exhausted and say she needed 5 minutes just to breathe. But suddenly, the routine changed completely. She would arrive, avoid eye contact, leave her bag in some corner, and say, "I'm going to take a quick shower," and he would disappear into the bathroom for long minutes, sometimes almost an hour. I would sit in the room, listening to the sound of the water falling and wondering what, exactly, she was trying to wash away. It's strange how such a simple habit can carry so much distrust. I tried to rationalize it. She just wants to relax. It's normal to want to take a shower after work. You're exaggerating. But the heart always speaks louder than logic, and my heart was screaming that something was different. He was shouting that the woman who came out of that bathroom was not the same woman who had gone in. And then came the third change, perhaps the most painful, the giggling while typing. Before, when she was on her phone, everything was perfectly normal. She watched videos, replied to family, sent memes to her friends. But now, it was different. She was constantly typing, always very focused, with that restrained smile that escaped from the corner of her mouth. It wasn't an open, spontaneous smile. It was a hidden, intimate, almost complicit smile. It was the kind of smile a person gives when reading something that touches on an emotional or forbidden point. Sometimes I'd walk into the room and see her with that little smile, looking at her phone as if she were daydreaming. When she realized I'd arrived, she'd quickly lock the screen, put the phone in her pocket, or turn away. "Who is it?" I asked, and she always answered the same way. "Oh, nobody. Nonsense." Nonsense. That word hurt more than any other, because nobody smiles like that over nonsense. And the more she laughed to herself, the quieter I became. Because sometimes silence is the only way to try to understand what's happening without seeming desperate. But inside, I was falling apart. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't insecurity. It was the suffocating feeling that something was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to hold on. Over time, these small gestures grew like cracks in a wall. A crack here, another one over there. And, before you know it, the entire structure is compromised. But you keep pretending everything is fine because you don't want to face the possibility that what you had might be coming to an end. I tried to convince myself it was just a phase, stress, work pressure. I tried to believe it was just paranoia in my head. But at the same time, I knew the problem was growing, silently, hidden, and that something huge was about to happen. Because deep down, I understood a harsh truth. Sometimes, betrayal begins long before the evidence appears. It begins with gestures, in the silences, in smiles that aren't yours, in messages that arrive too late, in the small changes that hurt like slow stabs. And at that point in the story, I was already hurt, without even knowing the extent of the wound that was yet to come. After days of watching those small changes accumulate like dust in a forgotten corner of the house, I finally mustered the courage to talk to her. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to accuse. I just wanted to understand. The truth is, when we love someone, we try our best to avoid conflict, until the pain of not saying anything becomes greater than the fear of asking. I remember the night exactly. We were sitting at the table, eating dinner in silence. She was fiddling with her phone with her left hand while pushing food onto her plate with her right, without actually eating. That in itself was strange. She loved food. She was always the first to comment when I made something different. But lately it seemed like nothing caught her attention anymore besides that bright screen. I took a deep breath and said calmly, much calmer than I actually felt inside, "Can I ask you something without you getting upset?" She froze for a second. Just one. But it was enough for me to realize she already knew what was coming next. She put her phone aside, face down, of course, and crossed her arms. Her whole body shifted, like someone preparing for an attack even before. Knowing what the question was, she replied curtly, "Question." Her tone struck me harder than any words could. Still, I continued, I noticed you've been a little distant lately. The late-night texts, your phone always turned away. And I just wanted to know if everything's okay, if something's going on." I made sure to speak as gently as possible. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make any accusations. I didn't mention anyone's name. I just wanted her to open up to me. I wanted to hear from her that she was stressed, tired, overwhelmed, anything that made sense. But instead of taking a deep breath and explaining, she exploded. "Seriously? You're going to start with this?" Her voice rose immediately. "I already have so much to deal with, and now you're going to create even more problems? Is that it?" I remained silent for a few seconds. I hadn't expected such a quick reaction, nor one so aggressive. "I'm not making a problem," I replied. "I'm just asking. You've been acting differently. Is everything all right?" She stood up from the table as if she had been attacked. "Different how? Just because I work too much? Because I'm exhausted? Because my boss is an idiot who texts me all the time and wants me to solve his problems?" She spoke quickly, stumbling over her words, as if she were trying to build a wall between us before I could get close to the truth. "I'm overwhelmed. That's it. Isn't it obvious? Can't you just trust me without making things up?" That phrase, "making things up," hit me like a punch. I hadn't invented anything. I was just trying to understand what was happening inside my own home. "I trust you," I replied, remaining calm. "But lately it seems like you don't want me to see anything that happens on your phone, and that bothers me." She rolled her eyes. "My God, are you just like everyone else now? Are you going to control what I do? Do you want me to live with my phone glued to your face?" I tried to explain again, slowly, measuring each word. "That's not it. It's just that when you turn your phone over every time a notification comes in, it gives the impression that something is wrong. I just want clarity." She ran her hand over her face, annoyed. "I'm tired, exhausted. My boss won't stop texting, constantly demanding things outside of work hours. I didn't want to worry you, so I tried to handle everything myself. That's all." That was it. The explanation was ready. The perfect narrative. My boss demands quick answers. I'm overwhelmed. I didn't mean to worry you. On their own, those sentences even made sense. But the problem wasn't the words. It was the way she said them, in a tone that was too defensive, too rushed, as if she were reading from a memorized script. And what bothered me the most was that she had never mentioned being so overwhelmed before. Not like that. Not with that emotional intensity. "Okay," I said, giving her the benefit of the doubt. "If that's really the case, I can..." help you. I can ease things around here at home. She interrupted me abruptly. I don't need help. I just need you to stop with this paranoia. That's all. Paranoia. That word burns. It's the favorite word of those who have something to hide. I took a deep breath, trying not to lose myself. I just want the truth. That's all. She crossed her arms, looked away, took a deep breath, and said in a false, completely fabricated calm, I already said it. It's work. Just work. But something didn't add up. It wasn't what she said. It was the way she acted, the form, the rhythm of the voice, the gaze that wandered away, the body that stiffened, the defensive posture that arose even before the question was asked. When a person is telling the truth, they don't need to build a wall to protect themselves. When a person is clean, they don't react as if they were being judged for a crime. And at that moment, as she went back to fiddling with her phone, turning the screen face down once more, I had a silent, profound, unsettling certainty. The conversation didn't convince me, and deep down, I knew she wasn't trying to convince me either. She was trying to shut me up, because when someone is hiding something, any question, even the simplest one, becomes a threat. And that night showed me for the first time that the truth was not being told. It didn't matter how many times she repeated that it was just work. Something was wrong there, very wrong, and I still didn't have any proof, but my heart already knew. Some nights seem like all the others, until the moment they stop being so. That one started like any other. A silent house, lights off, exhaustion weighing on our shoulders, our bodies begging for rest. We'd argued a few days before about the cell phone issue, but, as always, everything was swept under the rug. Neither of us resolved anything. Life went on, at least on the surface. She lay down first, turned to her side, phone in hand, scrolling for long minutes. I pretended not to see, but each tap on the screen seemed a hammer in my head. After a while, she placed the device on the nightstand, once again face down, and said a simple, "Good night." I replied. It was true. I wanted it to be a good night. I wanted to sleep peacefully, to believe that it was all just in my head. I deleted it. I don't know how much time passed. I only remember the absolute silence being torn apart by the insistent sound of vibrations and a series of taps. It wasn't an isolated tap like a notification from any app. It was a sequence, one after the other, a call that didn't want to be ignored. I opened my eyes, a little dizzy, not knowing what time it was. The light from the screen on her nightstand flickered on and off, partially illuminating the room with that cold glow. I looked to the side. She was sleeping, deeply, as if nothing was happening. My heart started racing. That strange feeling I'd been having for weeks came back in full force, like a wave, engulfing me whole. I turned my face toward the phone. It vibrated again. 1, 2, 3 times in a row. It was as if that thing wanted to wake me up on purpose, as if to say, "Wake up! It's high time you knew." I took a deep breath and extended my hand. I touched the device carefully, almost as if I were picking up something forbidden. When I turned the screen over, I saw the time, 2:13 a.m. On the lock screen, a flurry of notifications. Lots of, several messages in sequence from the same person. I couldn't read the content. The device was password protected, but I could see the name. He wasn't the boss. She wasn't a friend. It wasn't anyone from the family. It was a name I didn't recognize. With each new vibration, the same name was repeated, with snippets of messages cut off below, but the characters remained hidden behind the screen's padlock. Each message seemed longer than the last, more urgent. My chest began to ache. I knew that, from that moment on, anything I discovered, there could change everything. Even so, I couldn't put the phone down. I picked up the device. My fingers were trembling. I tried to swipe the screen upwards in a mixture of impulse and desperation, even knowing I didn't have the password. That small attempt, deep down, wasn't about unlocking the phone. It was about testing how far I was willing to go to uncover the truth. On my third attempt to swipe the screen, I felt a sudden movement beside me. She woke up. It was as if her body had a sensor just for that. She didn't wake up to the vibrations. She didn't wake up to the messages. She didn't wake up to the light from the screen, but he woke up the exact moment I touched the device. She opened her eyes in a startled, almost wild way, and the first thing she did wasn't ask if everything was all right, if something had happened, or if I had felt unwell. No. She simply snatched the phone from my hand. Fast, aggressive, instinctive. "What are you doing?" she yelled, a mixture of anger and panic in her eyes. I stood motionless for a second without reacting. I was sitting, leaning halfway on the pillow, trying to process what had just happened. "Your phone wouldn't stop ringing," I tried to explain, still in a low voice. "I thought it was something urgent." She pressed the device against her chest as if protecting a secret within it. Her heart was beating so fast you could see the movement in her neck. "You have no right to mess with my phone while I'm sleeping," she snapped. I took a deep breath, feeling a lump in my throat. "I didn't touch it. I only picked it up to see if it was some kind of emergency. It's 2 in the morning. The phone wouldn't stop ringing." She didn't want to listen. "This is trespassing. This is disrespectful. You don't trust me, is that it?" Right then, at that moment, it clicked. It wasn't about the cell phone. It wasn't about the early morning hours. It wasn't about the notification itself. It was about the panic she felt when she saw me with the phone in my hand. Her reaction said everything that words denied. She got out of bed as if she had been expelled from it by something invisible. "I'm not going to stay here with someone who treats me like a suspect in their own home," she said, her voice trembling. I don't know if from anger, fear, or guilt, maybe all three. She walked to the door, left the room, and a few seconds later, I heard the sound of the living room sofa sinking as she threw herself onto it. The house, which should have been silent, now seemed to be screaming. I was alone in the room, sitting on the bed, my chest heaving, a heavy silence surrounding me. The darkness seemed greater than before. The sound of the clock on the wall, which I normally didn't even notice, now bothered me as if it were counting down. There, in the early hours of the morning, something happened that is difficult to put into words. I understood in a painful way that trust no longer existed, not because I had taken her cell phone. But why did she choose to protect the device rather than look me in the eye and say, "Calm down, it's nothing serious"? She preferred to run away, attack me, accuse me, rather than explain herself. He preferred the sofa to conversation, the blockage to transparency. Lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, I could only think of one thing. If there's nothing to hide, why so much fear of being seen? That night broke something inside me. It wasn't an ordinary fight. It wasn't just any disagreement. It was a line that broke. Up until then, I was still trying to justify everything with work, stress, and tiredness. After that early morning, it was too late. Because deep down, I knew. Someone who wakes up in a panic upon seeing their partner with their cell phone in their hand. It is not defending privacy. He's protecting a secret. And that night, even without yet knowing the size of the hole, I was absolutely certain something was being hidden from me. And sooner or later, it would come to light, with or without a password. After that early morning when she snatched my phone from my hand as if she were protecting a treasure chest full of forbidden things, I spent days trying to act normally, trying to take deep breaths, follow my routine, pretend everything was all right, when, inside, distrust was consuming me drop by drop. The truth is, you don't go back to normal after a shock like that. The relationship remains the same on the surface, but inside, something is crooked, misaligned, impossible to fix without clarifying the truth. It was during this period of quiet tension that something happened that I will never forget. The encounter with her boss. I never had any reason to distrust him. On the contrary, she always spoke of him as someone rigid, serious, focused on his work, sometimes even grumpy, a demanding man, somewhat of a perfectionist, but professional. In my mind, he was just that, a boss, a name on a badge, nothing more. But on that day, everything changed. I needed to take a document to her, something she'd forgotten at home, a contract she had to sign that same day. She called me asking me to bring it to the office. Her voice sounded strange, too dry, as if she were afraid someone was listening. I found it odd, but I went. I arrived at the company building, went through the entrance, and went up to the reception area where she worked. She hadn't yet returned from her lunch break, so I asked to wait in the hallway. That's where I found him. Her boss turned down the hall holding a briefcase and a cup of coffee. As soon as he saw me, his whole body stiffened. It wasn't a normal reaction. It was instantaneous, almost involuntary. His eyes widened slightly, as if he'd been caught off guard by someone who shouldn't have been there. "Ah, you're the husband of wife's name, right?" he asked, forcing a somewhat tense smile. The way he said husband sounded wrong, as if the word carried too much weight. I confirmed, smiling, politely. He extended his hand, and I shook it, but his palm was sweaty, completely sweaty. A man of that stature, with that rigid posture, that practical and cold manner, with his hand trembling with nervousness? Something didn't add up. He tried to keep the conversation casual, but his voice always sounded a little off-key, as if he were saying each word with absurd care, choosing syllables like someone stepping through a minefield. "She is very dedicated," he said, glancing quickly at the door, down the hallway, anywhere but my face. "It's always available," he added, taking a quick sip of his coffee, which almost spilled onto his shirt. I watched that spectacle of discomfort, trying to understand the reason. He seemed afraid of me, and that made absolutely no sense. I'd never had any trouble with him. I'd never gone to her workplace in an aggressive manner. I'd never caused any trouble. I'd never even seen him before. Why then was this man acting like someone who had just hidden a body? He continued speaking, but each sentence seemed laden with an invisible tension. "Your wife is very professional. Lately she's been busy, but she is handling everything well." And as he spoke, his eyes kept avoiding mine with an almost desperate insistence, as if looking directly at me would force him to confront some truth he didn't want to admit. That's when I noticed something important. It wasn't the discomfort of a boss seeing his employee's husband. It was the discomfort of someone who knew more than they could say. At one point, he opened his mouth as if he were about to say something truly important. A truth, a warning, an apology, I don't know, but something profound. He even raised his hand, as if asking for attention, and swallowed his words. She closed her mouth. She took a deep breath, and she looked away toward the hallway, as if someone were watching. "Look," he began. Just tell her that I have the documents. She'll understand." The way he said, "she'll understand," was strange, as if he were speaking a hidden phrase within another phrase, as if there were a secret meaning hidden within it. Before I could ask what exactly she was supposed to understand, he tucked the folder under his arm, mumbled a hurried, "Excuse me," and left, almost stumbling. I stood there in the company hallway, the document still in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. It was impossible to ignore the feeling that this man was about to say something big, and had backed down at the last second. And it was at that moment that a simple, yet devastating question formed in my mind. Why did he seem more nervous than she was? Because if she was really just overworked, if the texts were only from her boss, if everything she said was true, why did he, and not she, seem the most frightened by my presence? Why did that man, who supposedly only charged her professionally, react to me as if he had a secret in his hands? Or worse, like someone who was trying to warn me about something, but couldn't. That brief interaction ignited a flame that I couldn't extinguish. If I had doubts before, after that meeting, I was certain of one thing. Something bigger is happening, and he knows it, and she knows it. I'm the only one still in the dark, but not for long. After that awkward encounter with her boss, I couldn't look at the situation the same way anymore. Before, I thought it was just something between me and my wife. Mistrust, changes in behavior, turning the phone upside down. But after looking into that man's eyes and seeing the nervousness etched on them, I realized there was something bigger at stake. He knew something, and yet he chose to remain silent. The following days were strange. At home, she made a point of acting as if nothing had happened. She continued with her cell phone glued to her hand, continued laughing to herself, continued going straight to the shower when she got home. Every now and then, I caught her watching me, as if she wanted to gauge how much I still suspected, or if I had let the matter die down. I pretended I had left. She pretended to believe it, and our house turned into a theater. On the outside, we continued normally. Good morning, good evening, how was work, what are we going to eat? Inside, there was only silence, unease, and unanswered questions. Then, 2 weeks later, she came home with something different in her eyes. It wasn't normal tiredness, nor the stress of another work deadline. It was a strange glint, mixed with tension, expectation, and something I still couldn't name. She entered the house, dropped her bag haphazardly on the sofa, something she never did, and blurted out, almost theatrically, "My boss was fired." The way she said fired seemed more rehearsed than spontaneous, as if she had mentally repeated that phrase several times before getting home. I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. "What do you mean, fired? Out of nowhere?" I asked. She widened her eyes, placed her hand on her chest, and began to feign surprise as if she were in a soap opera. "You don't understand. It was a shock at the office. Nobody expected it. He was simply called into the director's office, and that was it. They fired him, without warning, without anything. It was a scandal." She gestured excessively. She spoke too loudly. She seemed like someone trying to convince me of a story she didn't even fully believe herself. "But did they say why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She hesitated. It was quick, but I saw it. A slight delay between my question and her answer. An empty space where, for a second, the truth almost slipped away. They said it was inappropriate behavior," she murmured, glancing to the side. "Internal stuff, you know, company policy, employee complaint, that sort of thing. Inappropriate behavior. Complaint." Those words kept spinning in my head. I remembered the encounter in the hallway. I remembered his hand trembling, from the gaze that couldn't meet mine, from the strange phrase, "She'll understand." And for the first time, a terrifying hypothesis crossed my mind. What if he had been fired because of her? Not because he did something to her, but that's because he knew too much. She continued speaking quickly, as if she wanted to fill the room with words so that there would be no space for silence, because it is always in silence that the truth screams. It was tense there. Today, seriously, everyone was talking, whispering in the corners. "I didn't even know what to think," she said, putting her hand to her forehead as if shocked. "He was annoying. He was demanding. But I never imagined something like this would happen." I observed every expression, every gesture, every little dramatic exaggeration. She seemed to be acting. The problem wasn't what she said. It was how much she said. The amount of superfluous detail, the repetition of phrases, the effort to appear surprised. It was as if he was trying to guide me toward a specific interpretation of the situation. "Your boss was fired for being a bad man, a rigid boss, a difficult person. You have to believe that. The end." But deep down, something didn't add up. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction. "And you?" I asked. "How are you feeling about this?" She blinked a few times as if the question had caught her off guard. "Me? Oh, I don't know. Confused, right? He's been my boss for years. I mean, he was. It was strange seeing him leave under escort." She paused dramatically for a moment. "But I think it was the right thing to do. If the company found out something serious, all the better." The word grave came out heavily. I asked, "Something serious, like what?" She gave a weak smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Oh, honey, I don't know. Maybe he mistreated someone. They say some of the female employees were bothered, you know. That kind of toxic work. Environment stuff. You know how it is." I kept looking at her. She spoke in a way that seemed rehearsed, as if she were repeating what someone had suggested she say. "He never did anything to you, did he?" I blurted out on purpose, watching her reaction. She froze for a second. Just one. But then, again, I saw it. "With me? No, of course not," he replied too quickly. "I've always been professional. I never gave him an opening. He could be demanding, sometimes rude, but nothing too extreme." She resumed pacing the room, fidgeting with her purse, her hair, her clothes, everything but the truth. And the more she spoke, the more a feeling grew inside me. That wasn't a real surprise. It was staged. The story didn't add up. If he was just a boring boss, why did he seem so nervous when he saw me? If it was just a matter of inappropriate behavior, why did his expression in that hallway look more like someone carrying guilt or fear? Afraid of what? Afraid of whom? And most importantly, if she was just one employee among many, why did I have this strong feeling that he had been fired because of her or because of something involving both of them? I wanted to ask directly, did you have something with him? Did you report him for something? What really happened at that company? But something inside me held back those questions, not out of fear of the answer, but because I knew that if she was willing to lie, she would do so even more forcefully if I put her on the defensive. So, I remained silent and simply replied, I understand. What a situation, huh? She seemed relieved that I hadn't insisted. She even sat down on the sofa, throwing her head back like someone who had just finished a theatrical performance. Yes, it was a tiring day, he said. I'm glad it's over. He finished. She said it as if that settled the matter, as if his dismissal was the final straw in whatever strange thing was going on. But for me, it was exactly the opposite. It was the beginning of a new phase of my doubts. Because from that day on, a thought began to grow in my mind and never left. If he was fired, it's because someone knew something. What if he had something to do with the late-night texts? This dismissal is not the end. It's the consequence. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt that the line between work life and personal life had disappeared a long time ago. I just hadn't seen what went on behind the scenes yet. She felt she had swept the problem under the rug. But for me, it was as if a light had been turned on behind the scenes of the story. I didn't yet know what she was hiding, but I was absolutely certain of one thing. The boss's resignation was no coincidence, and the way she reacted only proved it to me. Her story just didn't add up, and when the narrative doesn't add up, that's because someone is trying to hide the main chapter. There are days that start out normal, absolutely ordinary. Those days when you wake up, have coffee, go about your routine as if nothing could change, and then, suddenly, in an ordinary instant, everything changes. Everything turns upside down. That afternoon was exactly like that. I was at home, finishing up some simple tasks, washing dishes, tidying up a few things, replying to overdue messages, nothing extraordinary. The kind of day you go through on autopilot without expecting anything new. That's when I heard the sound of the gate slamming shut and, soon after, light footsteps, climbing the stairs. I thought it was a neighbor dropping off flyers or maybe one of those online purchases you make and then forget about. But when I opened the door, I saw something that made me feel cold inside. On the ground, there was a brown package, completely ordinary at first glance, but with one detail that changed everything. There was no sender, nothing, no name, no address, no store label, no description, only my name, handwritten in a hurried, slanted, almost trembling script. For a moment, I thought about leaving it there, ignoring it, pretending I didn't see it. But my instincts, those same instincts that have been screaming inside me for weeks, began to throb. I picked up the package. It was light, but something inside was moving, like leaves, papers, maybe an inner envelope. The texture of the brown paper was somewhat crumpled, as if it had been handled several times before reaching me. I closed the door. I felt a shiver run down my spine. And for some reason, I didn't take the package to the living room table. I took it to the bedroom. I don't know why. Maybe because deep down, I already knew that it had something to do with what was happening inside that house. I sat on the bed, placed the package on my lap, and stared at it for several long seconds. It was like facing a bomb. I knew that once I opened it, there was no going back. My heart was pounding. My hands were trembling. And yet, I opened it. The first thing I saw when I tore open the side and pulled out the contents was a white envelope, perfectly sealed, with the same lettering as on the outside of the package. In the center, 2 words, "For you." I swallowed hard, opened the envelope, and what I found inside made my hands lose their strength. There was screenshots from cell phones, transcripts of audio, copies of entire conversations, internal company documents, behavior reports, and professional emails. Everything organized, divided into categories, as if someone had dedicated time, a lot of time, to putting together a complete dossier. The first few pages were just images, screenshots of conversations I should never have seen. Messages exchanged late at night, in the early morning, during work hours, outside of work hours. Messages that involved her. And another name, a name I didn't recognize. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't an office colleague. It was a contact name saved as something generic, just P, the same name that had appeared that morning on the vibrating cell phone at 2:13 a.m. My heart began to pound in my chest. My hands were sweating. The air felt too heavy. Following the pages, there were snapshots of conversations from weeks, maybe months, maybe longer. Conversations filled with private emojis, intimate phrases, inside jokes, plans, and meetings, disguised as get-togethers. Messages with obvious subtexts, invitations, confessions, and more than that, messages that clearly showed something was going on, something emotional, something secret. I swallowed hard. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, but I forced myself to continue. Right below the conversations, there were transcribed audio files, and that's where I almost dropped the envelope. Her voice, written in words, appeared several times, laughing, venting, complaining about me, speaking of missing someone, promising things, scheduling appointments. Each line felt like a blow. I kept turning the pages, even though every part of me screamed to stop. I found internal company documents, reports on inappropriate behavior, and interactions outside of corporate norms. Among them, one detail froze me. Her boss had found out everything. He had sent emails to the board of directors, warning that something was wrong. Internal messages indicated that he refused to cover up what was happening. Reports show that he confronted her, and worse, she threatened to report him, distorting facts to protect herself and this P. I stopped. I closed my eyes. I tried to breathe. The world seemed to spin. And then at the end of the envelope there was a small, folded piece of paper. A note, simple, direct. It's devastating. I opened it with trembling hands. There was only one sentence. You deserve to know the truth. Just that. No name, no signature, no further explanation needed. At that moment, several pieces finally fell into place in my head, all at once, as if they were just waiting for the final piece of information to form the complete picture. The boss's nervousness when he saw me. The way he seemed to want to speak, but couldn't. The strange phrase, "she'll understand." The sudden dismissal. Her theatrical exaggeration when delivering the news. Messages in the early morning hours. Defensiveness. The cell phone is upside down. Take a bath immediately. The hidden giggles. And when I put it all together, a stark and brutal truth was revealed. Someone tried to warn me, and the package contained that warning. I collapsed onto the bed, the envelope open, and the evidence scattered around me like pieces of a life I thought was mine, but never was. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, hurts more than realizing you were fighting alone for something the other person had already given up on a long time ago. And that afternoon, with that silent and cruel package in my lap, I finally understood. The truth will come out. She always arrives, even when it comes by mail. I had already understood from the shock of the package that something very wrong was happening. But until that moment, everything was still shrouded in a fog. There were images, documents, fragments. It hurt, but it was still almost abstract. It was when I really started reading the messages that the truth stopped being theory and turned into a stab in the back. I grabbed the first sequence of screenshots, the ones with dates, times, and the darn contact saved simply as P. The conversations began in a seemingly normal way. Work-related stuff, customer matters, meetings, reports, projects. Can you review Client X's contract? Can you send the quote today? It turned out perfect, thank you. Everything was professional, until it wasn't anymore. As the screens progressed, the tone changed. The responses started coming in with emojis. First an R's, then. Before long, it wasn't just thank you for the report anymore. It was, you're the only one who understands me here. If you leave the company, I'll leave too. You have no idea how special you are to me. And she would answer, not as an employee, not like someone who just did their own job, but as someone who allowed themselves to enter a dangerous game. You are special to me too. Only you know how to make me laugh in this chaos. Don't talk like that, I'll get used to it, okay? I would read that and feel my stomach churn. With each screen, it seemed that the professional boundary was being erased. The line between colleague and something more ceased to exist. A comment arises regarding her clothing. A joke about how she looks beautiful, even when she's tired. A late-night message. I arrived home, but I'm still thinking about you. She replies, careful, if this continues, my mind won't shut off today. It seemed like an innocent flirtation. It seemed like a joke, but anyone who's been through it knows. It's no joke when it starts taking up space in your heart. I continued scrolling down through. The messages. The talks were progressing. They started scheduling strange meeting times, meetings that weren't on any agenda. I'll arrive earlier tomorrow so we can resolve that matter calmly. I'll stop by your office before business hours. No one will be there. We can talk in the parking lot, it's more relaxed there. And between one message and another, inside jokes would start popping up. References that only the two of them understood. Nicknames, comments about other colleagues. If people knew what we talk about, they'd die of envy. Shh, it's our secret. Secret. This word always comes before the fall. Among the screenshots, there was a conversation that took place in the early hours of the morning. Date, time, everything's there. 1:37 a.m. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about the way you laughed in front of me today. It's stuck in my mind. You're silly. Go to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. If I dream about you, it's your fault. She responds with a broken heart emoji and a giggle. I didn't need to listen to any audio to understand. That wasn't friendship. That wasn't just relief at work. That was blatant emotional betrayal. And the more I read, the more I understood that the problem was much deeper, because it wasn't just words. They started arranging dates outside of the company environment. In a message exchange, I saw, that coffee shop near the building was perfect. We need to go back. Next time, we'll choose a more secluded spot. I was afraid someone would see us. If anyone sees this, I'll say I'm just taking care of the best employee I've ever had. Amidst laughter and veiled insults, comments about me began to surface. He doesn't even notice anything? No, he trusts me too much, and I don't want to hurt him, but I stopped. I repeated that phrase 1,000 times in my head. I don't want to hurt him, but the word but is always where respect dies. I continued reading, even with my vision blurry. Sometimes I feel like I have two lives. Working with you makes me feel alive. At home, I just exist. She wrote this, with their own hands, for another man. I tried to breathe, but the air didn't seem to go in properly. Everything was spinning, and amidst all that emotional baggage, one thing became clear. The betrayal didn't begin in bed. It began in the mind. It began in the heart. I didn't know, and honestly, I don't know if I ever will, how far they physically went. If they met in hotels. If there was kissing, touching, physical contact. But one thing I knew for sure. She wasn't mine long before I knew it. She was already sharing her attention, affection, smiles, and intimacy. She was already allowing herself to be seen by another man in a way that should have been exclusive to me. That alone would be devastating. But the package contained more. Among the company's internal documents came the real shock. It wasn't a matter with the boss. She wasn't having a relationship with the boss. I had no romantic history with him. The involvement was with a client of the company, a man who was always around, who frequented the office, who occupied meeting rooms, who had financial power, and that he was buying not only services, but also her attention. The boss had found out. In one of the many internal reports contained in the envelope, there were records of him warning that the relationship was unethical, that it was overstepping boundaries, that it could harm the company, compromise contracts, and ruin the reputation of the sector. Further on, there was a transcript of an internal meeting. I can't close my eyes to what's happening. She is getting involved with a client. This goes beyond professional boundaries. In another excerpt, she asked me not to get involved. He said it was personal life and that I was exaggerating. But that's not how it works. This involves the company. It involves all of us. There were emails in which he clearly stated, "I'm trying to protect the company and, in a way, protect it from itself." And then another email, even more desperate, "If this continues, someone is going to get hurt. And I'm not just talking about work." When I read that sentence, I understood everything. The boss wasn't the villain of the story. He tried to stop it. He tried to set limits. He tried to cut the tie. He tried to warn them, and he paid the price for it. While I was still trying to process it, I found one last sequence of messages, this time between her and that client. He said, "Your boss is starting to interfere too much." She replied, "Leave it to me, I know how to handle him. If he continues, he'll be the one who suffers, not us." It sent a chill down my spine. Suddenly, the boss's dismissal, which seemed so fair in her version of events, sounded like a huge injustice orchestrated by someone willing to do anything to keep a secret. At that moment, I realized the depth of the abyss I was falling into. My wife was betraying not only our marriage, but also truth, ethics, loyalty, to everyone. She was deceiving the company. He was manipulating the boss. He was covering for a client. And above all, he lied to me. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a system of lies. And the package, that anonymous, cold, and silent package, had been the only honest voice amidst so much falsehood. I closed my eyes, the papers trembling in my hands, a single phrase echoing in my head. It wasn't about the boss. It was with a client. And the boss tried to protect me. And I hadn't done anything, because I didn't know. But now I knew. And then, after we see, there's no way to unsee it anymore. Just when I thought nothing else could surprise me inside that package, after seeing screenshots, audio recordings, forbidden conversations, and internal documents, I found something that made my heart freeze in a different way. It wasn't anger, it wasn't pain, it wasn't even jealousy. It was a feeling I didn't expect to feel at that moment. Shame, not by me, but by someone who had been dragged into a chaos that wasn't his own. Someone who, from the beginning, tried to warn me, but I only realized it too late. Among the pages scattered on the bed was a separate envelope, with her former boss's name handwritten on it. The handwriting was firm, neat, and slow, the opposite of the note that read, "You deserve to know the truth." This envelope had emotional weight. I could tell even before opening it. When I broke the seal, I found a letter, long, dense, written with restrained sentences, as if each word had been repeated 1,000 times before being put on paper. I sensed that the man had tried to write that letter countless times before, but only now had he found the courage. I started reading. "I don't know how to start this, but you need to know what happened." The letter began like this. Simple, direct, honest. He continued, "I tried to talk to you that day in the hallway. Do you remember? But she saw me talking to you, and after that, things got much worse for me. My heart ached. I remembered his gaze, from the trembling hand, from the trapped voice, that feeling that he was trying to warn her, but couldn't. I kept reading. I discovered her involvement with a client more than 3 months ago. It wasn't something sudden. I started noticing when she and he began scheduling meetings that didn't exist. I paused, reading for a few seconds. I took a deep breath. It was too heavy to realize that this had been happening for so long, and I had no idea. He continued, "I confronted her privately. I told her that this crossed any professional line. She laughed at first, then tried to deny it. But when I showed her the messages that I myself saw on the internal system, she lost control. The image appeared in my mind. She was nervous, desperate, but not because she was being caught. Yes, because I was losing control of the situation." I continued. She started screaming. She said I was stalking her. She said I was obsessive. She said I was harassing her. I felt physically unwell. I felt a burning revolt rising through my body, an indignation I never imagined feeling for someone who, until weeks before, was just the annoying boss she mentioned. The letter continued. I never laid a finger on her. I never made an inappropriate comment. I never crossed the line. But she saw that the only way to get out of the situation was to turn the tables. It was like taking another punch to the stomach. She started crying in the principal's office, saying that I was making advances that made her uncomfortable. He used my strictness as proof of aggressive behavior, and she even said that I threatened her with my job. And then, the sentence that destroyed any doubt I might still have had. I was fired the same day. I had to stop. I dropped the letter into my lap. I ran my hands over my face, trying to absorb it all. He had lost his job, reputation, stability, all because of her lie, because of the involvement she wanted to hide at all costs. And in the end, he wrote, I expected her to come out and tell the truth, but she kept lying. She kept manipulating. And I realized you were the only one who didn't know anything. The last part of the letter seemed written with profound weariness, a sincere despair. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it to clear my name. And also because I saw you in the hallway that day. I saw your look, and I realized you were a decent man being deceived. I stopped breathing for a few seconds. That sentence weighed more heavily than all the others. I don't expect you to thank me. I just want you to know that I didn't do anything she accused me of. And that, if I had managed to talk to you that day, maybe none of this would have gotten this far. Finally, there was a signature and a final sentence. Good luck. No one deserves to live in the darkness of lies. When I finished reading, I felt a silence inside me. Not that empty silence, but a full silence, full of awareness, full of truth, burdened by a weight I was carrying without knowing it. I closed the letter slowly, like someone closing the eyes of someone who is hurt. Everything made sense now. Fear of the boss, trembling hand, averted glances, the phrase, she will understand, sudden dismissal, her staging while telling the story, the mysterious package. The truth was clearer than ever. He was fired to protect her secret, and he sent me that package to protect me. While she was inventing lies to save her own skin, he was the only one who had the courage to tell me the truth, even though he had lost everything. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since the beginning of this story, I felt not only pain, I felt clarity. I felt that the masks had finally fallen, and I knew exactly what I needed to do next. There are times in life when you feel like you're carrying a bomb in your hands. Not a literal bomb, but an emotional one, something so heavy, so explosive, that you know that when you put it on the table, nothing will ever be the same. The package, the boss's letter, the screenshots, the audio recordings, the documents, it all burned inside me like wildfire. It took me a few hours to digest everything. I wandered aimlessly through the house. I opened and closed drawers. I tried to eat but couldn't. I tried to sleep, but my body was trembling. My heart was racing as if I were about to walk through a door from which there was no turning back. But I knew I couldn't postpone it any longer. I needed to face the truth, and I needed to make her face it too. When she got home from work that day, she entered the house speaking loudly, as she always did when she wanted to seem too normal, like an actress trying to maintain a role that no longer made sense. She took off her shoes, put her bag on the sofa, and came into the kitchen. Hey, honey, you're acting strange. Today, she said, in that way she always did when she wanted to gauge me. Did something happen? I didn't answer. Not immediately. I simply pulled a chair from the table, sat down, and placed the envelope full of evidence right in the center. A simple gesture. Silent. But it caused her body to freeze like a statue. She looked at the envelope, then at me. Their eyes changed color. They switched from everyday mode to survival mode. What is this? She asked. Her voice caught in her throat. I pushed the envelope closer to her. Open it, I said. Just that. She hesitated. He took a deep breath. She gave a nervous smile, the kind she used when trying to manipulate the situation. What are you doing? Why? She asked, trying to sound offended even before knowing the content. I remained silent. Absolute silence. Sometimes silence is louder than any scream. She finally opened the envelope. He removed the first few pages, and as soon as he saw the screenshots, her face lost all its color. This isn't real, she stammered. He picked up the papers with trembling hands, flipping through page after page as if searching for some flaw, some mistake, some opening to deny it. "This is a setup," she said, raising her voice. "Do you really think I would do that? My God, you're getting paranoid." I didn't answer. I'll turn to another page. More prints, more conversations, transcribed audio files, company documents. She started breathing rapidly. "This piece of junk proves nothing," she said, now shouting. "Nothing!" I placed the boss's letter on the table. She stopped. It was as if I had received an invisible slap. He picked up the letter, read the first few lines, and when he realized what it was about, tried to throw the paper away. "He's crazy! He's always been after me! He made all this up because I rejected him!" she yelled desperately. It was the same story she had told the company, the same narrative that destroyed his reputation. But now she was saying that while looking me in the eyes, and I could see the lie as clear as day. "He was harassing you," I finally asked, with a calmness that even I didn't recognize. She hesitated. For a second, I wasn't sure if I should continue with that version. Yes, she said. "He kept looking at me strangely, treating me differently, making comments." "Then why did he have screenshots of his conversations with the client?" I asked. "Why did he have reports? Why did you have emails? Why were you and the client arranging secret meetings? Why did you lie to me, to the company, to everyone?" She turned pale. The mask was slipping, and she knew it. He then tried the second favorite strategy of someone who is cornered, the choir. She threw herself into the chair, put her hands to her face, and began to sob. I was confused. I was vulnerable. You weren't paying attention to me. I made a mistake. But that's not how it was. It wasn't like that at all. You don't understand. The client, She tried to stitch together a new version, but it was already too late. Each tear seemed fake. Each sob seemed rehearsed. And I, for the first time, looked at her not as my wife, but like someone who had been deceiving me for a long time. She tried to get closer, to touch my arm. I walked away. "Please," she said. "We can talk. I can explain. I slammed my hand on the table. Not strong, not aggressive, but firm enough to make her stop talking. "I don't want to hear another version of your story," I said, looking directly into her eyes. "I already know the truth." She remained quiet, completely still. Even the crying stopped. And it was in that silence that I finally realized I didn't lose her. She lost me. Because the loss doesn't happen when the person leaves. Loss happens when the truth comes out, and it reveals who was really there with you, and who was just passing through. She tried one last move. "We can start over. I can change. I can delete everything. I raised my hand. "It's not about deleting. It's not about changing. It's a simple matter. You haven't been mine for a long time, and only now have I realized this." She cried some more. This time, maybe for real, or perhaps because he finally understood that the narrative had ended, because when the lie dies, the mask falls with it. I collected the papers. I put it back in the envelope. I got up, and he said the only sentence that needed to be said, "I'm not going to carry on with a life you've already decided to abandon." He finished. She tried to say something. I left the room before she could finish, and for the first time, after weeks living in a labyrinth of doubts, I felt free, not happy, not relieved, but free, because the truth, however painful it may be, sets you free. And on that day, in that room, faced with all that evidence, she was the one who lost, not me. When everything exploded, I thought what would come next would be an endless void. I thought the house would become a graveyard of memories, that every corner would scream her name, that I wouldn't be able to breathe without feeling the weight of what had happened. And for a while, that's exactly how it was. The first few days after the confrontation were tough. The silence was strange. There was no longer any sound of messages arriving in the early morning hours. The sound of her rushing through the shower as soon as she arrived was gone. There was no more giggling hidden in the corner of the sofa. And it's curious how, when the person leaves, you realize that what you called life as a couple weeks ago wasn't life as a couple at all. You were just trying to support a house that was falling apart all by yourself. She left. He took some things, he left others. He took clothes, perfumes, souvenirs. He left behind a trail of lies and a broken heart. But what she didn't count on, that God does not leave empty that which he decides to set free. In the first few days, I cried. I cried more than I like to admit. I cried silently. I cried in the shower. I cried sitting on the sofa staring into nothingness. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal. It was grief for the life I thought I had, and never truly did. But as the days went by, something unexpected began to happen. The house, once cluttered, became live. I would wake up in the middle of the night instinctively, expecting to hear my phone vibrate, but silence would fill the room. And instead of bothering me, that silence began to feel like peace. I looked at the nightstand, and there was no longer an appliance facing down. There was no hidden password. There was no mystery. Gradually, the house became mine again. The sofa ceased to be the place where she turned her face to type secret messages and became just a sofa again, a place where I could sit, put on any movie, and simply exist, without needing to decipher gestures, laughter, and glances. The nights became calm, not because the pain had disappeared, but because the restlessness had ended. I no longer had that constant feeling that something was wrong, that there was a ticking time bomb hidden inside the house, about to explode at any moment. I knew exactly where I was, at the end of a lie and the beginning of a truth. Gradually, I began to reclaim something I had lost a long time ago, and didn't even realize it: my self-esteem. Because betrayal doesn't just destroy the relationship, it destroys the way you see yourself. For a long time, I wondered, wasn't I enough? Did I do something wrong? If I had been more this, less that, maybe she wouldn't have done what she did. This type of thinking is a dead end. If you're not careful, you'll fall in and never come back. But as I reread the evidence, the boss's letter, the conversations she had with the client, I began to understand something important. It wasn't about me being insignificant. It was about her being less than she claimed to be. I have always been loyal. I've always been honest. I was always there, fully present. She chose not to be there. She was the one who opened the door for someone else. She is the one who built the labyrinth of lies in which she ended up trapped. And that awareness began to heal me. Having friends and family nearby also made a difference. At first, I didn't want to tell anyone. Shame hits hard. You think they're going to judge you, blame you, say you were foolish for trusting them. But when I finally had the courage to speak, something beautiful happened. I was not judged. I went embraced. I had a friend who came to my house unannounced, just to sit on the couch with me and listen. A relative sent a message saying, "You are not alone." Some people prayed for me without me even asking. And amidst all of this, one phrase began to make even more sense. Sometimes God shows you the truth in a painful way, but a necessary way. Because if I had remained trapped in that illusion, in that staged house, in that lie, I might never have discovered who was truly on my side, and who never was. Today, the pain hasn't completely gone away. Scars don't disappear. It remains there as a reminder of what you went through. But instead of burning, it becomes a sign of survival. I started taking better care of myself. I started doing things again that I had given up, walking aimlessly, listening to music without thinking about anything, cooking for myself, to arrange the house my way. Simple things. But for the first time in a long time, I was doing all of this in peace. I was no longer afraid to go home. I was no longer afraid to look at anyone's cell phone. I was no longer afraid of what might be hiding. And ultimately, that's one of the greatest freedoms anyone can have. Sleep peacefully, knowing you are no longer surrounded by secrets. From the outside, many may have said, "What a shame, your marriage is over." But inside me, the phrase was different. Thank goodness the lies are over. Because sometimes what we call the end It's just God pushing us out of a place where we should never have stayed. Today, if I could summarize this phase in one sentence, it would be, I didn't miss a wedding. I recovered myself. And if there's one thing I've learned in the midst of all this, it's that the truth hurts, cuts, tears, but it also heals, liberates, and reorganizes. I don't know what comes after this. I don't know if I'll be in a relationship again, if I'll love someone else, if I'll rebuild my life with someone. But one thing I know for sure, I will never again accept living only half a story. I will never ignore signs again. I will never again diminish my feelings just to keep someone by my side. If we are to walk together, let it be in the light. If it's going to be love, let it be true love. If we're going to share our lives, let there be no secrets that require anonymous packages to come to light. Because, in the end, true freedom came after the pain. And, as strange as it may seem to say this, I am grateful to finally be out of the prison I didn't even know I was in. The end of a story like this doesn't come abruptly. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand speeches. He arrives silently, like a door that closes slowly, like a sigh after much crying, like that strange feeling that, despite the pain, something is finally in its place. After everything that happened, the package, the discovery, the confrontation, the departure, the reconstruction, I spent days thinking about the real meaning of it all, because betrayal is not just an event. She's a lesson, a scar, a mirror, a watershed moment. And over time, understanding began to mature within me. The package arrived right on time, and it freed me from the lie that held me captive. That phrase echoed in my mind for days, maybe weeks, not as revenge, not like bitterness, but as an absolute profound truth, impossible to ignore, because in the end, life always gives signs. It always shows cracks. He always whispers warnings. We are the ones who insist on pretending we didn't hear. We are the ones who choose to believe in easy rhetoric, in mismatched gestures, in smiles that don't match the eyes. I knew something was wrong long before I saw any proof. My heart was screaming. My intuition was screaming at me. My whole body could feel it. But I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe in the "it's just work" approach. I wanted to believe in the rushed shower. I wanted to believe the hidden giggles. I wanted to believe that love was enough to stop someone from destroying what we built together. But trust isn't just about love. Trust is mutual. It is well cared for. It is maintained. It is nurtured every day with truth, with respect, with clear boundaries. And when these three pillars are broken, no relationship survives that. Looking back now, I realize that the biggest problem wasn't the betrayal itself. It was a repetition of the lies. It was manipulation. It was her attempt to reverse roles, to make me doubt myself, to paint the boss as the villain, to distort facts, to play with the truth as if it were a torn piece of paper. The truth always comes out. Sooner or later, she'll find a way. Sometimes it comes through conversation. Sometimes it comes through a look. Sometimes it comes through a suspicious attitude. And sometimes it comes in a package with no return address. And when she arrives, it's not to destroy. It's to liberate, to be freed from doubt, to break free from insecurity, to free yourself from a weight you didn't even know you were carrying, to break free from the life you thought you had, but that never existed. The truth can hurt, it can bleed, it can destroy walls, but she never destroys people. Yes, a lie. And if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that trust shouldn't be blind. Respect should not have to be begged for. Loyalty shouldn't be demanded. It should be given naturally, easily, and consistently. Limits exist to protect. Whoever consciously crosses boundaries has already chosen to hurt you long before you realize it. And God, in His wisdom, knows exactly when to pull the rug out from under you that you insist on standing on. Not to bring you down, but to pull you out of the false comfort where you were slowly drowning. Today, when I look back on everything I've been through, I don't feel hatred. I don't feel anger. I feel clarity. The clarity that I deserve much more than halves, than secrets, than made-up excuses. Clarity that love is not something that can be hidden on a cell phone. The clarity that peace is not something to be begged for. It is something to be cultivated alongside the right person. And if the price of that clarity was pain, it was a fair price. Because now I know that in the end, the truth always comes out. And when it arrives, however painful it may be, it brings with it something that no one else could give me. Freedom. Freedom to start over. Freedom to be myself. Freedom from carrying a daily lie into your home. Freedom to live without fear. Freedom to look at myself and recognize my own worth. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The truth didn't come to destroy my life. She came to save what was left of her. And now, finally, I can breathe. If this story captivated you from beginning to end, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment, what would you do if you received a package like this?